And Matt, a frequent guest on Steve Bannon's War Room. Also, Matt, doing a lot of work on the voter integrity issues as far as what happened in 2020 and what's going on with these machines, and kind of not the retail end like I'm focused on, but the election end of it, not necessarily the voter end, but the election end. And so we've had some differences, so I've asked him to join us today and outline what his evidence is and what he believes. So Matt, welcome.
Thanks. I'm glad to be on your air.
All right, so Matt, I'm hyper-focused on the voter fraud end of this equation. And I thought the two bills in Georgia, which we've been following very closely, SB Senate Bill 241 and House Bill 531, are great bills, and I think they're going to really fix the problems we saw in Georgia in 2020. And I think if these go to conference and we pass something similar to when the governor signs it or doesn't sign it, it becomes law anyway, he would have to veto it. That's going to fix a lot of these issues we had and turn this thing around. You have a little bit of a different view. Can you share with our audience, Matt, what that is and why?
Sure. I disagree with you profoundly. I think that these bills do not do much to help the problem, do not do much to address the core problem. And the House bill, specifically HB 531, as it's written, actually makes the problem much worse. And I can explain why in three very simple reasons.
Okay.
So first of all, one of the biggest problems with H.R. 1 is that it essentially makes it impossible to challenge absentee ballots. So somebody casts a ballot, the county puts up a report, and the state puts up a report saying that this individual cast the ballot, and citizens in that county in Georgia can come forward with a letter and protest that ballot, say that this person should not be allowed to vote. What HB 531 does is it basically allows the state to immediately start opening the absentee ballot affidavit envelope the moment they get it. 3 weeks before the election, they can start opening those envelopes up without the opportunity to challenge it, and also without any observers. Now, they do allow observers for the counting of the ballots themselves, but not for the opening of the oath envelopes, which is basically, once a ballot is stripped out of the oath envelope, it's gone, it's cast. You can't do anything to stop it. So from 3 weeks out, they can start stripping off these absentee envelopes, and there's no way to challenge them at that point. They'll get an absentee ballot from somebody who should not be able to count it. They'll strip it open, throw the ballot in the pile with all the other ballots that are legitimate, and then later that night or the next day report that they even received that absentee ballot. So that's a huge problem. That's a big problem with H.R. 1, and it's made even worse with this legislation. The second big problem with this legislation is how it allows people to vote who do not ever establish that they are residents of Georgia, and in fact doesn't necessarily even establish that they are citizens of the United States. I'm going to read to you from page 30, line 764, very specific provision here. An elector who's registered to vote by mail, but did not comply with subsection of Code Section 21.2.220, which requires them to show a form of ID, but not proof that they live in Georgia, and who votes for the first time in this state by absentee ballot shall include with his or her application for an absentee ballot or in the outer envelope of his absentee ballot either one of the forms of identification in subsection 21.2.417. Again, that does not require you to prove you live in Georgia. That's kind of a bad thing. But then it continues, or a copy of a current utility bill, bank statement, government check, paycheck, or other government document. Paycheck, bank statement. Anybody can get a paycheck or bank statement and submit it. You do not have to be a citizen of the United States. You don't have to live in Georgia. And, people have fancy laser color printers these days. Do you really think that the county clerk is going to call up your bank and make sure you have an account there, or call up, the employer listed on the check and make sure that you actually are an employee there, or if that business exists at all? And the third problem I found with this bill is that I understand the desire to turn off money from billionaires trying to influence the outcome of the election by making it much easier to vote in, say, Fulton County, but not doing that in other counties. I understand that. But what this legislation says is that basically the election system, each county can't accept funding grants or gifts from any source other than the government. That's cool until you actually understand how elections work in Georgia. I was talking yesterday to the head of elections in Collins County, a ruby red rural county. almost all of its polling places are held at churches. They pay by far below market value for for the ability to use those facilities. So what they're effectively doing is getting a large in-kind contribution from the Elks Club, the Knights of Columbus, and all the little churches in their town. That will now be outlawed as this bill is written. So those are the ways that this bill makes things worse. And there's a whole lot of problems that we had in the last election that it doesn't solve at all, such as cleaning the voter list, such as actually authenticating that the absentee ballots come from the people that cast them, such as doing something about black box voting equipment. Now the Senate bill. The Senate bill is not quite so bad.
Wait.
Okay.
Can we
sure.
can we stick with the House and then go to the Senate? Otherwise, it's.
I was going to say some nice things about the Senate bill that it kind of suggesting the right direction, but
let's just wait and let's analyze what you said on the House bill, which I think is a good bill. So we can agree to disagree.
Did you read it?
You bring up.
No, but I have a question. Did you read it?
Yes.
You read all 48 pages of it. Okay.
If you want to continue to talk, go ahead. I'll wait, and then we'll stop at 7:59:50. Matt, go ahead.
I'm good. I just had my question, but please proceed.
Okay. So number one, you say HR 1 is your first point. Well, HR 1 is not going to become law. So to be talking about HR 1 is a waste of my time and our listeners, because right now it is not going to become law because Kirsten Sinema in Arizona said she's not busting the filibuster. So until that changes, HR 1 is not going to become law.
That's pretty disingenuous of you to say that, because that wasn't my point at all.
It's not going to become law.
But that's a disingenuous point. That wasn't my point at all. That's completely disingenuous.
I don't believe. Okay, so if HR 1 becomes law, this entire discussion we're having is moot.
Not necessarily, but I brought up HR 1 because it's got a lot of problems in it that your audience knows about, but your audience.
It's a bill that is not going to pass.
That's irrelevant to my point. My point is that your audience hates HR 1. They know it has problems. One of the worst problems in it is also in this bill, which has passed and potentially can pass the Senate and then go to the governor's signatures. That was my point. So it's disingenuous for you to bring up some point about HR 1 not passing. My point is that there's bad things in it. I'm glad it's not passing, but one of the particularly bad things is in this bill. That was my point.
Okay. Let's get to the absentee ballot issue. Okay, what HR 531 specifically fixes is, and the thing that we wanted is, you cannot get an absentee ballot without an ID. You have to prove a residence. Now, if somebody wants to go look, nothing is 100% in life, Matt. Nothing.
That's not true. That's technically not true. I understand your point, but
we're not going to have a discussion. Why don't you just finish? You got 9 minutes. Go.
Well, I'm just going to say that.
Talk about the Senate bill.
Okay. Well, I'm talking about the House bill because you said that it requires ID, so I'm going to actually read from
whatever you want, Matt. You're good to go. You got 9 minutes. Go.
Page 26. I'm sorry. Yes, page 26, go to line 650. If the elector does not have a Georgia's driver's license or personal identification card pursuant to Article 5, Chapter 5, Title 40, or social security number, the elector shall so affirm in the space provided on the outer envelope and place a copy of one of the forms of identification set forth in subsection 21-417, which does not include anything that would demonstrate that you live in Georgia. So that's in the bill that you and I both read.
Okay, so somebody would have to go through the process of faking and creating utility bills, bank statements, paychecks in order to vote. Last time, they just got a ballot and mailed it in. This time, the ballot doesn't come to them in the mail. They have to request the ballot. They have to show some form of an ID. They have to go through several steps. In 2020, they didn't have to go through. And that's what we believe was the biggest root of how the Democrats won there. These mail-out ballots where they didn't have to do anything. I mean, there was no ID. They were mailed out to everybody. People didn't live there. That's gone now. You have to request it, and you have to have some form of ID. And if somebody wants to go through the rigmarole of creating a false bank account or a false paycheck with a laser printer, I mean, I guess hopefully they'll get prosecuted. But it's a lot of effort. And maybe there's a better way to do it. But right now, 531 is better than anything that any other state that went through this has got, and so that's why I commend the legislators for doing this. Maybe it's not the perfect bill, but it certainly is better than anything else I've seen.
But what you're, guys, can you just jump in?
Number three.
I just want to jump in on that point though, because I know, but
go ahead.
It's trying to have a discussion, not just a straight up interview with you. But that's not
there is
actually.
No discussion because
no, but I'm reading you the bill. I'm just telling you, is it 2 points?
Matt,
one,
it's fine. Go ahead.
One is that you don't have to fake a paycheck or fake a bank a letter from a bank. You can just use yours, but that doesn't prove that you're a citizen. Secondly, it also doesn't prove that you live in the state of Georgia. And my point from the beginning is that the outcome of this election in Georgia was determined by people casting ballots who were not entitled to because they did not have residency in the state of Georgia. I have a database of names and numbers and everything that would prove this beyond a reasonable doubt. I'd be happy to share that with you personally. I'm sharing it with another reporter at 10 a.m. this morning and go through that. But that was determinative. So what this is not doing in either the House or Senate bill is requiring these individuals to prove that they are residents of Georgia when they request an absentee ballot or register to vote. And the state is not doing anything to scrub people who should no longer be on the voter list from being on it. That's the problem.
Okay. So I request an absentee ballot. It has to get mailed to me. If I live in Boston, Massachusetts, they're not going to mail it there.
Yes, they will.
They have to.
And they did.
But they're stopping that now because you have to have an ID.
No.
You have to have a Georgia ID that matches it.
I've just cited to you that it doesn't.
I guess it's not. Okay, look, it's not the perfect bill, right? In the perfect world, that you would have a bill that does all of this. If you look at where we were in 2020, and you look at what both the House and the Senate has done in this session, this is yeoman's work, and you're going around trashing it. And these guys are getting targeted. They're getting protests at their home. They're getting stripped of committees. They're getting fired from jobs because they're standing up. They're doing the best they can. It's not the perfect bill.
If this is the best they can do, they should resign. Because let's go to
the Senate bill, Matt. I
sure.
appreciate your opinion. Go to the Senate bill. We've got 5 minutes.
Yeah, well, the Senate bill, I think that it feigns in the right direction. We Look Ahead America, my organization, has put out some policy objectives, and we see hints of them in the Senate bill, at least two of them. One is that it sets up a hotline for the Attorney General to review voter fraud allegations, but it gives the Attorney General personally 3 days to review every one of these allegations as they come in. I don't think that's sufficient or practical. What we've called for is a division within the Attorney General's office to be created to be dedicated to voter integrity. And unless there's funding or something like that, it's wholly impractical. The second thing that's kind of in the right direction in the Senate bill is it calls for a multi-state voter registration system, presumably to detect people who move to another state, register to vote there, and invalidate their ability to vote in Georgia, which again, there are thousands of people who did that, who cast ballots in Georgia despite not being residents and having registered in other states, and many of them voting in both states. But the problem with this approach is that it's not specific enough. It's not saying how this database will be set up, what the criteria would be, and it ignores several currently available databases like the NCOA database, which the Postal Service does. So if you say John Fredericks says, hey, I'm permanently moving to North Carolina to the Postal Service, well, I think the Board of Elections in your state should inquire to say, hey, are you still here or not? They should also take advantage of the SAVE database, which the U.S. Customs Immigration Service makes available to everybody, every state, but almost no one takes advantage of it, to mark their voter list for known aliens who are not eligible to vote in the country. There are some other issues with the Senate bill, but I just don't see anything substantially solving the problems of authenticating absentee ballots, of cleaning the voter list, and of providing the support to attorney generals for prosecution of these issues, and for, I think, the level of transparency to the public that's needed, along with the black box voting equipment, which I think is another discussion.
So this is going to go to conference, and hopefully they'll get the best of the Senate and the best of the House, and then it's going to become a bill. It's going to pass. Are you advocating it be defeated?
I haven't seen the bill that's come out of conference. It would be foolish to make a comment on it. However,
are you advocating if you were in the House as a Republican, you would have voted against HR 1?
I would have
House Bill
I would have introduced my own legislation that follows the guidelines that we outlined.
If your amendments went down, like many of them did, right? They went down. For instance, Burt Jones, Brandon Beach, they submitted a bill to get rid of Dominion machines, go to paper ballots. It didn't get out of committee. This is political reality. So died in committee, couldn't get the votes to get it out. That's the way the system works. They didn't do it. So I'm just asking you a straight up question.
Well, I would say that given what I'll answer it. I'll answer. I don't want to. You don't want to make it difficult for you.
Okay, I'm sorry. I've got that written down. House Bill 531. You're in the House. You're from Dahlonega. You have to vote up or down. How would you vote?
I would have to get firm clarification on the issues that I've raised for you, and if there are issues as I've articulated them here are in effect, and I think this bill makes things worse, I vote against it. I would vote probably for the Senate bill because it doesn't really cause any harm. It has some small good things in it, but I don't think it really addresses the problem. So there's your answer.
Okay, so this is going to conference. It's going to come out. I think this is a tremendous effort by House and Senate Republicans in Georgia to fix 90% of what has gone on. It's not a perfect bill, Matt. Nothing is perfect in this world. I understand what your concerns are, but it's a lot better than we were in 2020, and so we're going to have to agree to disagree on that. I appreciate your input. I appreciate your concerns, and thank you for your time.
Thanks for having me on.
John Fredericks, Radio Network. We'll be right back.
You're listening to The John Fredericks Show. Common sense for the Commonwealth. On great radio stations across Virginia and online anytime at thejohnfredericsshow.com.
This is WJFN Goochland.